Good morning.
Good morning.
What is your name?
Donna Farmer,
Donna Farmer. By whom are you employed?
Monsanto Company.
And how long have you, Donna Farmer, been employed by Monsanto Company?
Since September of 1991.
Okay. Don't make me do the math. How many years have you been with Monsanto?
25 years.
25 years continuously employed with Monsanto?
Yes.
And as we sit here today, still employed by Monsanto?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And what would you describe your title as?
I'm a toxicologist in our Product Safety Center.
Is it fair to say that you're the lead spokesperson for Monsanto on Roundup?
I have been one of the spokesperson for the safety of Roundup when it comes to the toxicology.
Ma'am, who is Christoph Gusten?
Christoph Gustein is a head of our regulatory affairs for chemical products in Europe.
And how long approximately has he been with the company?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've known him for many years.
And you work together with him as the job requires. Because of your knowledge and experience with Roundup, you were selected to defend Roundup.
I have been involved with glyphosate since 1996, so as this indicated, I had a lot of knowledge. And so based on that in-depth knowledge for over those many years, yes, I was asked to help defend glyphosate.
Okay. And that's your job, defend Roundup, right?
No, that's not my job. I wouldn't agree with that. My job is to make sure, as a regulatory toxicologist for glyphosate, that we meet all the requirements by the regulators. And then there are times when there are questions that are asked about the molecule that we need to do responses for. So it's more than just, as you say, defending the molecule.
Now the truth is, as early as 2004, your job was to defend the glyphosate business, right?
Yes, and again, I want to put that in context, that it's not just about defending glyphosate, it's about being technically correct. And so to be the toxicologist for glyphosate, you need to know the toxicology database, you need to know what the regulatory agencies and reviews are thinking about them. And then when there are questions or allegations about it, then we go back and we put those into context and support the product.
Produced from your file, and it's a document with your name on the top, produced again from your file, Donna Farmer. Donna Farmer, you see that on the top left-hand corner?
Mm-hmm.
And it says your #1 goal, defend and maintain the global glyphosate or Roundup business, right?
It does say that, but again, that's the phrase that was used, but it's more than just doing that. It's about being technically aware of what is going on with it. So when you look on the other side, you will see that it talks about technical expertise and deliverables that then would come into the position of helping to defend glyphosate.
And to put the context on a time frame, your job has been, at least since 2004, to defend and maintain the global glyphosate or Roundup business, right?
Yes, I've provided technical support and helping defend glyphosate since that time.
And that's what you're doing here today?
I am here to, again, answer technical questions on glyphosate, and I have that background to be able to do that.
That goes to that. And this is the media training that was produced. Here's a copy for you, ma'am. Thank you. And a copy for you, counsel. There you go. You've seen this before, haven't you, ma'am? 1-7.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. And this was one of the documents that you used in media training, true?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to Bates stamp 2054. And there's some handwriting on this page. Is that your handwriting? Back up so I'll see it.
Yes.
Okay. So moving from the question to the answer you want to give. That's one of the skills that you were taught, right?
In media training, yes.
All right. And this is your handwriting. To the contrary, right?
That is my handwriting.
Okay. Go to the last page, if you would, ma'am. A few questions, and we'll leave that document. 22064. This is your handwriting?
Yes.
Okay, and you wrote about IARC here, right? And did you see the IARC there?
Yes, I did write that.
All right. So you were in media training dealing with the IARC issue. Fair?
We were asked to be available to address questions based on the IARC decision, and as a technical person to support glyphosate, that was what I was asked to do.
Okay. That's exhibit. This needs to be untangled here at some point. Sure, that's all right. Yeah, let's move it. I'm sorry. Now, ma'am, as a Monsanto employee and person with your particular skills and expertise that we've been discussing about, even you, Donna Farmer, cannot say that Roundup does not cause cancer. True.
Roundup does not cause cancer. There's no data that supports that statement.
Let's take a look at the documents you prepared before the lawsuit was filed, ma'am. This is 1:8, produced from your file, and I have a copy for you and a copy for counsel. Here, ma'am. Here you go. Seen this before, haven't you, ma'am? All right, ma'am. Now, this is a document, a copy of an email sent by you, right, ma'am? Donna Farmer.
Yes.
Okay. And it was sent by you on September 21st, 2009, right?
Yes.
And it's concerning Roundup, right?
Yes.
And in that, you say this: you cannot say that Roundup does not cause cancer. We have not done the carcinogenicity studies with Roundup. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did read that correctly. But I want to point out that I should have, in other emails that I have done, is that what we talk about is while we have not done carcinogenicity studies with Roundup per se, we have data on glyphosate. We don't believe the surfactants there are not carcinogenic. So normally what I would say is that when you put those two together, even though we haven't done these carcinogenicity studies, that there is no evidence that Roundup would be carcinogenic.
I want to read what you said before the lawsuit was filed. You said, you cannot say that Roundup does not cause cancer, ... We have not done carcinogenicity studies. For those of us that aren't cancer doctors, carcinogenicity studies mean studies about whether something causes cancer, right?
We're looking to see if, could you repeat it again? I'm sorry.
Carcinogenicity studies, what does that mean?
Those are animal studies where we look to see if there's a relationship between tumors and exposure to the substance.
How long has Monsanto been selling Roundup? Since 1974?
Yes.
So from 1974, and help me with the math, to 2009, well, it'd be 35 years? 35 years and no studies on whether Roundup caused...
As I was saying, that we are not required to do chronic carcinogenicity studies on the formulated product, but we are on the active ingredient. And based on that data and based on our knowledge of the surfactants, we can put those two together. And that's why I was saying this should have had an additional statement in it. If you look at other emails of mine, you would find that I would put that in there, that we have no evidence of carcinogenicity with glyphosate. We have no evidence with the surfactant. Therefore, even though we haven't done any carcinogenicity studies with Roundup, we would not have any evidence to support that it says it would cause cancer.
You're cautioning John Combest, is that his name?
That's John Combest, yes.
Okay, who is he?
He was in our public affairs group.
Okay, so you're telling public affairs in 2009, you can't say Roundup does not cause cancer, right?
And again, I said that, but again, my mistake in this email was that I didn't put in the qualifiers that I normally do.
And you said, we haven't done the studies with Roundup.
Again, we have not done the studies, but we are not required, but we have data both from glyphosate and the surfactants to say that Roundup would not cause cancer.
Roundup is a combination of glyphosate and a surfactant, true?
Yes, in addition to a lot of water.
And surfactant's not water, is it?
No, but you
What-
left out one of the major components of a Roundup branded product is water.
Didn't mean to leave out anything. Tell the jury in lay terms what a surfactant is.
Surfactant is a surface acting molecule that helps really reduce the tension so that a droplet of water can then spread a soft surface. You will find surfactants in products like pesticides as well as in consumer and home care products.
And to be clear, the surfactant helps the glyphosate adhere to the plant longer, right?
No, it helps the water droplet to spread and stay the plant leaf surface longer so that glyphosate then can penetrate through the leaf.
Ma'am, your name originally appeared on the Williams article as an author, the Amy Williams article, and then it was struck out before it was published. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I was. I told him that I didn't do anything on it and my name shouldn't be on it. I had made some edits, but it was not at a level where I was not to be an author.
Let's mark as Exhibit 118 the email where you admit you added a section of genotoxicity. All right, here's put that right there. Let's provide a copy to counsel. Ma'am, that's an email from you, right? To one of the authors of the Williams paper, John M. DeCiso.
DeCiso.
Excuse me. And what you're telling, is that Dr. DeCiso?
DeCiso.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so you're telling Dr. DeCiso regarding this Williams article that I added a section in Genotox, right? From the Gassner study.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're working on a section for Gassner on the mechanistic section, right?
The reason why I did that is there was more information that Dr. DeCiso and Dr. Williams were not aware of, and then I wanted them to be have that information available for them if they chose to keep it in their publication or not.
And you also cut and pasted summaries from of the POEA surfactant studies, right?
Again, very open that we provided those. The summaries are what they are. Mm-hmm.
Well, ma'am, it's not very open. If a scientist looks at the article, he doesn't know that the genotoxic section was written by a Monsanto employee, right? Because your name's not on the list of...
As I said, we have contributed to these articles. We want to make sure that they are full. I think when I look at what I did, I wanted to make sure they had the full range of information available to them that they may not have been aware of, and that everyone knows that Monsanto, they talk about us in their credits. And it's a lot of pages. I mean, it's a very large document. So these are only just a few sections in a very, very large document.
But if an independent scientist reads this, he's not going to know that Monsanto cut and pasted the summaries of the POE surfactant studies because your name was removed as well.
Again, it's a draft for them to include or exclude in their final publication. And we provide input all the time because we have some more of the knowledge that they do. But there's nothing here that we're trying to hide. We're actually adding more information for them to include in that review. Again, under the umbrella of transparency, we're trying to make sure that it's a really thorough, complete document. And then they can choose, in that sense, to either complete them, change them, delete them, do whatever they want to do with them.
The only thing that's hidden is that it was cut and pasted by a Monsanto employee.
Check.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's just providing some information for them to choose to incorporate into their document or not.
Make sure the right document get in the right pump. Right. In 2015, Bill Hayden tried to get John Aquavella to ghostwrite an article, and John Aquavella refused because it was unethical. You knew about that, didn't you?
I knew that there was, my understanding was there was a disagreement, a misunderstanding of that I don't believe it was to be a ghost written article. So I don't know all the details, but I knew that there was a disagreement and misunderstanding between John and Bill as to what was to be expected.
The next document we're going to look at is a series of emails about this request, and we'll discuss them. Exhibit 1-20. Ma'am, here's a copy for you and a copy for counsel. Now, this is a series of emails concerning that concern that Dr. Aquavilla had about being asked to ghostwrite. I want to start at the back and look at these. You ultimately come into this email chain. Okay. So in this series of emails that you ultimately come into, let's start at the back and look at them. I have a few questions, okay? All right, excuse me. All right.
Where are you starting?
I'm on page 30790. You see that page?
Thank you.
On that page, John Aquavilla writes to Bill Hayden and says, Bill, the plan sounds fine. I don't see my name in the office list. I should be where Tom Sorhan is, and he should be later in the alphabetical order. You see that, ma'am?
Yes.
So John writes back on November 3rd, 2015 to your boss / co-worker, William Hayden, and says, I didn't realize that, Bill. Also, I don't think that it would be okay with my panelists. We call that ghostwriting, and it is unethical. It's true, ghostwriting is unethical, isn't it?
Again, that's what it says, but that's not what happened. Again, I think there was a big misunderstanding in this. John wrote that. He was obviously very concerned, but that's not what happened. He is a very open author on it, and as we talk about, you can see up in here, we keep talking about there was a huge misunderstanding around authorship, and he became an author.
Let's look at this misunderstanding some more. You were brought in on the next email chain of this, weren't you? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, any chance that Don and I could have a 1:30 call with you today about this issue, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's a lot easier to talk with people than to just keep doing emails.
No record that way.
No, I don't think it was that. It's just a lot easier to get on the phone and have a conversation.
So, after that conversation, or just before, I don't want to get my timing wrong, but John sends to you and Dr. Hayden, I am on the first page here. He sends you and Mr. Hayden a poster, expert panel poster from a meeting, right? It starts on bottom page 1, goes over to page 2. You see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. And what he tells you is that there is an International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, recommendations for conduct, reporting, editing of publication of scholarly work in medical journals, right? Mm-hmm. And he bolds one key point in there. He's all persons designated as authors should qualify as authorship, and all those who qualify should be listed, right?
Yes. But again, I point out to you that this was a misunderstanding, which is taken care of in the next thing. We spoke. He was an author on the presentation. He was an author on the manuscript. And so, unfortunately, there was this conversation due to really an unfortunate understanding of what his role was, what it grew to be, and all these different things. And again, he's one of the authors.
Ma'am, you were one of the ghostwriters of the Intertech publications, too, weren't you?
No, there was no ghostwriting to begin with. Let's put that forward. And the second one was I didn't have anything to do with the Intertech publications other than maybe provide some studies or documents that the authors might have needed.
Okay, so I want to take you back now to 1999 again, and you remember that the Italian government was concerned about the genotoxicity potential of Roundup, and you worked on that issue, didn't you?
I remember some questions back at that time, yes.
And in order to work on that issue back at that time, you went to a Dr. Perry in England to have him look at the issue of whether Roundup was genotoxic. You remember that?
I don't believe I was the one that contacted Dr. Perry.
Monsanto contacted Dr. Perry, true?
I do believe that Dr. Perry was contacted by Monsanto.
And it was Mark Martins who initially contacted him, right?
Mark Martens.
And let's take a look at that a little bit. I'm going to look at it with you, produced by Monsanto, Exhibit 1-22. When you've had a chance to review, I have a few questions.
Okay.
So this was concerning an official request by the Italian government, right?
The first one starts off, yes.
Yes, ma'am. And going to page 2, if you would, please, which is 2108. External Global Network of Genotox Experts. Do you see that?
Oh, yes.
And it says there in this Monsanto document that Dr. Perry is a recognized genotox expert. See that?
Yes.
You agree with that, don't you?
I did not know Dr. Perry, but that's what I had been told, yes.
It was proposed that Mark Martens would contact Dr. Perry and ask him for a written review of articles that appeared in the public literature, 4 of them, right? Rank, Bolognese, Peluso, and Leo, right?
Yes.
And you were also going to start expanded discussions with Dr. Gary Williams, the gentleman you talked about who wrote an article for Monsanto, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Dr. Perry looked at those 4 articles about Roundup or glyphosate and wrote you a report, right?
I don't remember.
Here's Dr. Perry's first report. We'll mark it as Exhibit 1:23, produced to us by Monsanto and Discovery. All right, ma'am. What we're looking at here is a cover page from the Monsanto Technical Center, and it's a handwritten letter from Mark. It says, "Dear Alan, Donna, and Bill, please find herewith," in the English style, "Professor Perry's evaluation of the 4 papers I sent him on genotoxicity of glyphosate and Roundup," right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Excuse me, thank you. All right. Take that out. So I want to have a few questions for you, okay? Dr. Perry's report, if we could look at page 2097, which is the third page of his report, I suppose. And he says, in conclusion, concerning the rank paper, there's in vitro evidence of genotoxic effect of Roundup mixtures in adequate and in vivo studies. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now in vitro, what does that mean?
That means that it was in a Petri dish experiment. So you had a substance, a cell, or some organism in a Petri dish, and you were pouring the Roundup formulation on top of it.
And so the expert that you retained to review the RAND paper said the paper showed in vitro evidence of genotoxic effect. What does genotoxic mean again?
Again, it's damage to genetic material either through DNA mutations or structural damage or DNA repair.
All right, let's go to 2098.
And again, remember, this is the in vitro with the Roundup formulation with the surfactant that we talked about earlier.
Yes, and so now on 208, we're looking at, he's reviewed for you the Bolognese paper, and I want to go to 2098, and his conclusions from reviewing that paper are that there was a positive response in vitro, SEC, for both compounds. What's SEC mean?
It's another marker at looking at the structure of the genetic material, sister chromatid exchange.
He finds the response at 10 times lower concentration for Roundup mixture, right?
Again, we were talking about it had a surfactant in it, and we talked about how surfactants can damage. So these are human lymphocytes in vitro, and that surfactant, again, can damage the cell membrane. It has nothing to do with being genotoxic. It has to do with cytotoxicity, and secondary, you can get some genetic effects.
Both glyphosate and Roundup mixture produce positive response in mouse bone marrow micronucleus assay, right?
Yes, which is very unusual.
Both glyphosate and Roundup mixture produced increase in DNA strand breaks in mouse liver and kidney, right?
Where are you? I think this one is important to note, that the route of exposure for these of the liver and the kidney, the route of exposure was an injection of the formulated product, the products into the abdomen of the animals.
He also wrote, glyphosate increased the 8-OHDG in mouse liver. What is 8-OHDG?
Cells can be, there are what they call reactive oxygen species. They're oxygen, and through normal cellular processes or through external exposure to things, you can have these oxygen species formed. And then the body has what they call antioxidant mechanisms, and then they will then, in the normal production of just daily living, or if there's an external insult, those antioxidant mechanisms then will come into play then to reduce those free radical.
We call that oxidative stress, right?
Well, it is a part of oxidative stress, yes.
And oxidative stress can increase one's risk of cancer.
Not directly. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who have an opinion about that. When we're looking at oxidative stress in this situation, as I pointed out, this was given to these animals intraperitoneally, injected into them, and then they were looking at the effects of those organs that were exposed to the actual physical presence of these substances on those organisms. And oxidative stress is very much related to cell injury, cytotoxicity. And so that's what we've been talking about here is direct damage to cells, and then they have a certain function that they will do to protect themselves.
And Roundup, not just glyphosate increased 8-OHDG, but Roundup mixture increased 8-OHDG in mouse, liver, and kidney, right?
That's what it says, but again, remember, this was injected into the animal's abdomen, a very unusual route of exposure for an herbicide like Roundup.
Let's go to page 2012 of Dr. Perry's first report here.
2012.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, 2102, excuse me, 2102. What Dr. Perry tells Monsanto in this report is, in the in vivo studies, now what are in vivo studies again?
These were in whole animals, as we talked about, being injected into their abdomens.
He says that the positive study had a clear demonstration of bone marrow toxicity and involved multiple dosing, 2 doses, with the test agents in contrast to a single dosing agent used by rank. See that?
But you pointed out that the positive results were in contrast with the negative results of rank. So this is one of the issues with gene toxicity. You can have some that are positive and some are negative, and that's why we do a weight of evidence with them. So here he's talking about one that's negative and one's positive and what might be involved in those.
He goes on to say the data of Bolognese from '97 indicates that glyphosate is a probable in vivo genotoxin, right?
Yes, he does.
In the next paragraph, he says both glyphosate and Roundup induce significant increased DNA strand breaks in mouse liver and kidney, right?
Yes, but up above, again, he also talks about the Bolognese doesn't meet guideline standards. And so, again, this is an intraperitoneal injection. It's only a few animals. And so he's giving us the findings that he sees here.
Okay. Let's go to the next page. That 2103. All right. He summarizes in that first full paragraph the overall data provided by the 4 publications provide evidence to support a model that glyphosate is capable of producing genotoxicity both in vivo and in vitro by a mechanism based upon the production of oxidative damage, right?
He says that, but again, I want to remind you that there were some that were negative, and then again, oxidative damage can be due to cytotoxicity. In many of the studies where we see these kinds of responses, it's secondary to cytotoxicity, not a primary oxidative response.
He recommended on page 2104, paragraph B at the top there, ma'am, an assessment of the individual components of Roundup mixture to determine whether there is any components which act synergistically to increase the potential genotoxicity of glyphosate. Right?
He did, and it was a basis for a study that we actually did.
What study?
It was with Heydens et al.
Can you spell that, please?
It was Bill Heydens, Heydens.
Oh, you're a boss.
Mm-hmm.
And he did the study?
No, there was a group of us. We had some, because we are not in a laboratory, we worked with some laboratory people to look at this exact question, because again, we did not believe that these findings were related to a genotoxic effect, but secondary to some cytotoxicity. So we did a study doing an oral route of exposure, which would be more relevant, and we didn't reproduce the same findings. We did an intraperitoneal injection and got the same findings, but not an oral one.
Excuse me, what is the date of that study, and was it published?
It was a series of studies, so I don't remember exactly when they were, and I think it was in 2008 or 9.
Were they published?
It was published in one publication.
Which publication?
I don't remember what the journal was.
Were they ever submitted to Dr. Perry?
I would believe, based on what I see here, that we would have had a conversation with Dr. Perry, because it appears that that was the foundation for us doing that study. I don't know what the conversations were with Mark and Dr. Perry, but it was published, so it's out there in the open literature.
So he made these recommendations in 1999, and when did you start these studies?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I don't remember when we started them, but we did do them.
Were they ever repeated by independent scientists?
Anyone would be welcome to repeat them if they'd like to.
You did not retain any independent scientists to go repeat these. These were all done in-house at Monsanto.
We have very qualified scientists that can conduct these studies, and we did those studies, and then we put it out there in the peer review literature for people to look at and evaluate for their own.
Did you study to reproduce the same results from a peritoneal exposure and not oral?
Yes, we did, because we wanted to say, when we see studies like this, the big thing for us is to ask, is it real? And then is it reproducible? And then what does it mean? So we did the study again, and it was real. We saw the effects. And then our question was, what happens when you do a more relevant route of exposure? And then what does that look like?
Let's look some more at what Dr. Perry found when requested to look at these issues for Monsanto. Dr. Perry told you he would conduct these studies, right?
I don't remember that conversation.
Let's look at it. We'll mark it as Exhibit 120-24. All right, ma'am. This is Exhibit 1:24, and it's a document generated by Monsanto 8 days after receiving Dr. Perry's first report. See, it says December 10, 1999. I'm sorry?
That's February.
Okay, February 1999. Oh, a long time afterwards. I'm sorry. Excuse me. So I want to get this accurate. Exhibit 123 is February. That's right. They do it different in Europe. February 10th, 1999. Okay. So then, quite a few months later, December 1999, a group meeting occurs concerning these issues, and you are part of that meeting. You see Donna Farmer there?
This wasn't the only reason why that meeting was held. This was a subpart of a bigger meeting.
Oh, nor did I suggest it was, but it was part of the meeting, fairly?
It was one of the subject matters.
Okay. And what we said there was, let's go to page 2 is really what I want to ask you about. On page 2 of these meeting notes, I'm looking at paragraph number 4 of these notes up top, and it says, there's some indication of DNA damage observed in different test systems are due to cytotoxicity properties of the formulation tested than to actual mutagenicity, right?
Correct. That's what I've been saying.
I'm going to ask you about the exact words in the document in a minute. Do you recall refusing to let Dr. Perry do the test that you and Bill Hayden did?
Well, these are different studies than, he's talking about doing in vitro studies, and we did in vivo studies.
You never gave Dr. Perry any material to do testing, right?
I don't remember.
Let's look. In order to further develop the relationship with Dr. Perry, it was recommended that the surfactant samples be provided to him for testing. However, before sending Dr. Perry any samples, it was recommended that they undergo in-house testing first in similar in vitro screen, right?
Yes.
So you never sent Dr. Perry any samples, and he never was able to do any testing.
That doesn't say that. It just said that we wanted to do them in-house, and that you can see the request was made by toxicology to include ethermine. There's nothing in here that says that we didn't send anything to Dr. Perry.
I'm asking you a general question, Dr. Farmer, with all your extensive experience in glyphosate and Roundup. Are you sitting here and going to tell us that you sent Dr. Perry samples to do any testing or not?
I don't remember, but this document doesn't say that we weren't going to.
I
don't know.
What the document says, before sending Dr. Perry any samples, it was recommended that they undergo in-house testing first in a similar in vitro screen, right? Is that what the document says, ma'am? You can answer. He's not instructing you not to answer.
That's what it said, but again, it never says that we didn't send him anything.
Who's William Graham?
He is with our registration affairs group. He's retired. He was in Europe.
After his first report, then, the goal was to pay him 600 pounds, him being Dr. Perry, and persuade him that glyphosate was not mutagenic, right?
I don't remember that conversation. We believe it wasn't genotoxic, and there were a number of other large studies that met regulatory requirements that were out there, and those studies were not standard, so I can believe that we wanted to, we didn't believe that it was genotoxic and mutagenic.
All right, let's look at Exhibit 1:25, a series of emails to you and others about this issue. It's a short one-pager. All right, ma'am, you see you are sent this email in May of 1999 after his first report, right?
Yes.
What William Graham is asking is, how much will it be? The results are now needed to persuade him that nothing to do with glyphosate is mutagenic. That was the goal, right after his first report, was to send him more materials and try to convince Dr. Perry that your product is not genotoxic, right?
The studies that
Mutagenic, I'm sorry.
The studies that Dr. Perry looked at, as we talked about, had some unusual findings associated with them. Unusual routes of exposure, they didn't meet guideline standards, and we didn't believe that they represented glyphosate as mutagenic. And you can see the next sentence says the Echo Mammalian Tox Review came out with this conclusion. And over all these years, all the regulatory agencies have looked at those same studies that Dr. Perry looked at, and they've concluded that they don't support glyphosate being genotoxic or mutagenic. And so we, again, we're trying to work with Dr. Perry because we didn't believe it was, and we were trying to figure out what information can we give him, because others agreed with us that it's not mutagenic or genotoxic.
Let's look at the email from author Mark Mattins right above that. Bill, Perry's fee is agreed to be 600 pounds a day. He'll need 10 days to digest all the paperwork and make a report and spend one day with Larry Keir. That makes it 6,000 pounds, right?
That's what's written there.
Okay. That's excellent. You agreed to not send Dr. Perry any samples, true?
I don't remember.
Let's refresh your recollection. Exhibit 1-26, an email prepared by you in April of 2000 on this issue. And here we go. Here, ma'am, it's a copy for you, and a copy for counsel. So, ma'am, here we are, still in year 2000, and Donna Farmer you say, I want to read this exactly, should I go ahead and ask Todd to repeat the studies? Or should we use a different assay? I agree. We do not send samples to Dr. Perry until we get this sorted out. Right? Your instructions were not to send Dr. Perry any sample.
This is until we get it sorted out. So again, if you go to the first emails, we're doing not a normal micronucleus study. We're doing a it's called micronucleus, so it's a screening study we were looking at. And it looked like we had some conflicting results. And so that's what I was saying, is should we ask Todd to repeat the studies, or should we do a different assay? And I'm agreeing to someone that we don't send the samples to Dr. Perry until we get this sorted out. Again, it doesn't say that we didn't send them to him. We were just trying to assess what this screening study meant.
Fact is, you never did send Dr. Perry any samples, did you? Does this document refresh your recollection in any way that you ever sent your outside expert, Dr. Perry, any samples?
I do not remember.
Dr. Perry's first name was Jim, right?
I believe it was James or Jim, yes.
James. He passed away. You're aware of that?
I don't know when, but I was aware of that.
I think it was 2010. Does that sound about right?
I don't remember.
Okay. All right. Well, let's ask this. Jim Perry, Dr. Perry, told Monsanto in 1999 that this issue of oxidative stress should be addressed. Do you remember that?
We talked about it in that one document, and that's why we did the subsequent studies with Dr. Hayden's, the publication we talked about.
Did you do stress marker responses, stress response marker tests?
Similar to the ones that were in those publications.
Did you do clinical biochemistry parameters?
I believe we did.
And it's in that peer-reviewed published journal?
And there's histopathology as well.
Well, the truth was, ma'am, your boss told you that you weren't going to do the studies that Dr. Perry suggested, right?
We did studies, and we did the repeat of the Bolognese. That's what I remember doing.
Let's look at an email from your boss, William Hayden, to you on this issue. And we're going to mark it as Exhibit 127. All right, ma'am, this is William Hayden sends this email in September of 1999, right?
Yes.
Sends it to you and others, right? See your name there, Donna Farmer?
Yes.
It's regarding the Perry report, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, and he says Mark and all, Mark being Mark Matens, right?
Yes.
I read the report and agree with the comments. There are various things that can be done to improve the report. So Monsanto wants to change his report and improve it, right?
They are comments that they provide us a report, and we're going to provide comments back.
Let's step back and look at what we're really trying to achieve here. We want to find / develop someone who is comfortable with the genotoxic profile of glyphosate Roundup, and who can be influential with regulators and scientific outreach operations when genotox issues arise. That was the goal, wasn't it?
We look for experts to help us in this area, to answer questions and give us feedback on what we can do. So yes, we do look for experts to help us in this area.
Your boss says, my read is that Perry is not currently such a person, and it would take quite some time and $, studies to get him there. We simply aren't going to do the studies Perry suggests. It was the marching orders from your boss, wasn't it?
Well, that may have been what he said then, but we did do the studies. So again, I would have you look at that Hayden's publication.
What Mark Martin said about the Perry report, that it simply wasn't suitable for defense of the product. You're aware of that, right?
As we just talked about, we didn't agree with Dr. Perry's interpretation of all the data. We thought it was secondary to cytotoxicity and irrelevant routes of exposure. And we obviously had a disagreement with him. And sure, if we have someone who doesn't agree the way we interpret the data, we're not going to obviously have them out there being spokespeople for us.
It's Larry Carr, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Consultant that Monsanto has paid more than a few times to work on these issues, right?
No, Dr. Kyer was a gene tox expert who is retired from Monsanto, And based on his expertise, yes, we have kept him as a consultant.
Right. But now this clearly refreshes your recollection that you felt Dr. Perry had put you in a genotox hole.
I said that, but I think what we've talked about, this is from like 1999, and we did a lot of work subsequent to this to look at Dr. Perry's comments. We did work with him, and so I think what we're getting at here is that we just had a difference of opinion with him, and we needed to find some different data, and we know that it wasn't genotoxic, and put the information out there. We just disagreed with him.
What does clostridium mean?
Again, it refers to structural damage of genetic material.
Okay. And clostrogenic means something that can cause this process of clostridium, right?
Structural damage, yes.
Okay. So Dr. Perry did a second report for Monsanto on Roundup, right?
I don't remember.
Let's look at it. Exhibit 1:30 is a report prepared by Dr. Perry entitled The Evaluation of the Potential Genotoxicity of Glyphosate Mixtures and Component Surfactants. Here's a copy for you, ma'am. You can look at the document and then we'll have some more questions. Let me know when you're ready, ma'am.
Well, it may take a little bit, since this is a pretty big report.
All right. This Exhibit 1-30 was produced to us by Monsanto, and it's a second report entitled Evaluation of Potential Genotoxicity of Glyphosate Mixtures and Component Surfactants. James M. Perry. The same Dr. Perry we've been speaking of?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Is this the same James M. Perry we spoke about with the last report, ma'am?
Yes.
And so in this report, Dr. Perry prepared a table of 14 tables of things that he reviewed. Is that fairly what this is, or what would you explain this on the first page to be table 1 through 14? What do they represent, ma'am?
It is tables of what he reviewed.
Okay. Now let's look then at page 4237, Dr. Perry's report. And Dr. Perry says, and from his evaluation, these studies provide some evidence that glyphosate may be capable of inducing oxidative damage under both in vitro and in vivo conditions. Did I read that correctly?
Just given that, I'm not really sure what studies I want to go back and look and see what he's talking about. I believe that he's referring to these miscellaneous endpoints that are in studies that are, again, through intraperitoneal injection, not according to standard studies. And then you can see he talks about this other one, that there was negative results, but he's talking again about these other studies from the Pelosi and Bolognesi and Leoie that are not standard studies required by regulatory agencies. And again, we talked about how they can be secondary to in vitro toxicity as well as in vivo toxicity that could cause the oxidative damage, but that's a result of the exposure scenario.
These studies that he reviewed, ma'am, were studies sent to him by Monsanto, true?
They were studies in the open literature that we asked him to review.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, as we talked about, you have to look at how these studies are conducted. We talked about the intraperitoneal injections. We talked about that they don't follow standard guidelines. And again, that we didn't agree with his evaluation of the studies.
He was the expert you selected to review these papers, you being Monsanto, true?
Well, it does happen that we have people that we don't agree with. Experts have different opinions. That's why there are a lot of different experts out there.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's look at page 4240. Another conclusion of expert Perry after review of these studies. Quote, evaluation. These studies provide some evidence that Roundup mixture produces DNA lesions in vivo, probably due to the oxidative damage. That was Dr. Perry's conclusion, right?
Again, they're referring back to the same studies we've been talking about that are intraperitoneal injections, which is not a normal route of exposure. And the COMET assay he's talking about is in tadpoles, and those were at levels that were toxic to the tadpoles. So the results that we're seeing here, again, are secondary, even though you see oxidative stress is secondary to the toxicity that's being observed in these studies.
Let's look at his conclusions on page 4242. Overall conclusions. Number 2 is the one I would like to ask you about. There is published in vitro evidence that glyphosate is claustogenic and capable of inducing sister chromatoid exchange in both human and bovine lymphocytes. And he cites the public study that proves that, doesn't he?
I disagree with you that it proves that. The conditions of that study, those were the findings, but that is not the basic conclusion of the outcome of glyphosate. This was another study that wasn't conducted according to guidelines and that had some problems with the conduct of the study, and there are other studies that conflict these results.
He goes on page 4244, under the specific evaluation of the genotoxicity of glyphosate, to tell Monsanto that on the basis of the study of Leoy, I conclude that glyphosate is a potential claustogenic in vitro. His conclusion, right?
That's again what he says, but again, remember, this is in vitro. This is a petri dish experiment, and again, that those cells are sustaining toxicity, meaning when we talk about cytotoxicity, it means that the cells are damaged, and that the end result that you're seeing, this oxidative damage, is then the result of the cells sustaining cytotoxicity, and not a direct genotoxic effect. And you can see here it says even there's another assay that indicates it's not reproduced in germ cells.
He says under specific evaluations of genotoxicity of glyphosate mixtures that the studies of Bolognese suggest that glyphosate mixtures may be capable of inducing oxidative damage in vivo. That was his conclusion.
Again, that was the same study where they injected the formulated product directly into the abdomens of the animals. There was direct damage to the organs and to the animal, and the results are secondary to cytotoxicity.
He tells Monsanto in this report at 4266 I'm just about done with this report, but at 4266 Dr. Perry tells us that there is, and this is an F, in view of the increasing appreciation of the value of COMET assay as a marker of tissue-specific damage, I recommend the consideration of its use in any in vivo studies performed. You see that?
I see that's what he says.
And Monsanto never performed a COMET assay on any of its in vivo studies.
We have a different opinion of the value of the COMET study. There are other studies that are, the COMET study, you can actually get positive effects if you take blood from people who've been on a treadmill for 30 minutes. So again, you have to look at the study and what it provides. And this again comes back to talking about the oxidative damage with Bolognese. And again, remember, he is talking about doing a assay where, in talking about looking at the liver and the kidneys, where we actually went and did the studies in the whole animals that we shared with you about the Hayden's report.
The answer is Monsanto never did COMET assays, true?
No, we would not do COMET assays. We do not see it as a really valuable assay.
And this expert who you asked to review these studies told you, quote, the COMET assay would provide the ability to determine whether damage is produced in a wide range of tissues following glyphosate exposure. That's what he said.
This is an in vitro assay, and instead we always have higher value when you do an in vivo study. So we address the same comments in an in vivo study that would be of more value than the COMET assay that, no, we would not conduct.
Dr. Perry goes on to conclude his report on page 4267. If the genotoxic activity of glyphosate and its formulations is confirmed, it would be advisable to determine whether there are exposed individuals or groups within the human population. Do you remember receiving that advice from Dr. Perry?
I see it here, but again, the there is no genotoxic activity of glyphosate in its formulations. We would disagree with that.
All right, let's look at, did you publish Dr. Perry's report?
No.
Did you submit Dr. Perry's report to the Environmental Protection Agency?
The Environmental Protection Agency is familiar with all of those studies.
My question was not whether from the studies. Dr. Perry's report, did you submit it to the Environmental Protection Agency?
I don't know if it was or not.
Ma'am, your company has never measured the amount of Roundup found in fecal matter, or have you?
Not to my knowledge. No, we have not.
All right. Let's go back to epidemiology. When another study comes out in 2008 showing that herbicides increase the risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, it was your job to combat this, right?
It was, as we see it, when we hear information about our product, we want to make sure that we get the information out there for everyone to make a decision, and there are comments and statements we don't agree with, and we want to make sure we get out our technical information so people can make their own decision.
Let's go to Exhibit 1-42, an email from Donna Farmer, produced in this discovery. And here's a copy for you, ma'am, and a copy for you, counsel. Let me know when you're ready. All right, ma'am, let's go over this now. Exhibit 142 ends with an email from you, Donna Farmer, right, ma'am?
Yes.
It starts out with an email from a gentleman named Dean Nasser, right?
Yes.
Do you know who Mr. Nasser is?
He, well, I don't know if he was with Healthy Plants then or Western Association. He was with an industry association.
Okay. And he sends it to you and others, right?
He forwards us a press release from Beyond Pesticides.
Yes, ma'am. And this is in October of 2008, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in 2008, what he's forwarding you is information about a study that shows herbicides. Now, let's be clear, Roundup is a herbicide, right?
Yes.
Okay. Herbicides increase the risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, right? That's what he's sending you. You see that, ma'am?
Yes, that's what it says.
Okay. Case control study finds that a 2.2 odds ratio, and I know you're not an epidemiologist, but you know what a 2.2 odds ratio is, right, ma'am?
Yes.
For exposure, which means you're 2 times the chance of contracting the illness to glyphosate, right?
Well, I think there's other parts of this that we have to talk about. We don't know whether it was statistically significant. I don't believe those are. And so that was the point of this. When you send a press release out like this, it doesn't give you all the details that you can look at, how you respond to the study. And that's what I was asking him is, how do we combat this when this is just taken out of context? Not all the information's there is available. So in the 2.202 odds ratio, it's very minor, and I don't know if it was statistically significant. I don't believe it was, and that's an important consideration. So again, just because you have these numbers and these statements, it doesn't really mean that there's any real concern for this exposure. There's a lot more that that's why we talk about combating this. We need to get more information out there to talk about the toxicology, talk about the exposure, and then put this information in light of how many, they don't even tell you how many people were in here. So there's a lot of different things about this that we need to know rather than just take this as a press release from Beyond Pesticides, an anti-pesticide group.
Donna Farmer, did you just tell us that a doubling of the risk of cancer is insignificant?
What I'm telling you is that this is an epidemiology study, and it's not giving me any information whether it's statistically significant. It's not telling me how there's bias in the study. We don't know whether it's been corrected for using other pesticides. So looking at this at face value, while it says that that is the odds ratio, I don't really have any ability to tell you whether that is meaningful or not. And again, when I look at the weight of evidence for glyphosate, I would say that, again, this is just another epidemiology study that's not showing causation, and that we want to look at the biological plausibility and the exposure.
All right. You've raised an important point, Donna Farmer. Dr. Farmer, what does statistical significance mean?
Well, it's telling you that there is, when you look at the relationship, that it's more than just chance.
Right. All right. So You're aware this study in 2008 was put in a peer-reviewed journal?
Yeah, I don't remember which study this is. It doesn't tell the authors, and it doesn't tell anything about the journal.
Let's look at what else is in this email to you. It says the incidence of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma has been increasing over the past several decades. You were aware of that, weren't you?
Again, this is a press release from Beyond Pesticides. So again, it is a press release from them.
My question, Dr. Farmer, is are you aware when you receive this email, or even as we sit here today, that in fact the incidence of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma has been increasing over the past several decades?
In fact, I think it's flattened out now.
Now, meaning
I don't
how,
think it's increasing.
how recently, ma'am?
I don't know.
This email sent to you in 2008 goes on to say the link between pesticides and cancer has long been a concern. You were aware of that, weren't you?
I think that there are always concerns about use of substances and cancer. But again, this is just a study that doesn't have a lot of information. It's one study, and it's from a press release from an anti-pesticide organization.
It refers to another study. In 2002, the same researchers published a study that shows an increased risk for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from exposure to certain pesticides, 1.75 odds ratio for herbicides, 3.11 odds ratio for fungicides, a 3.04 odds ratio for glyphosate, and a 2.62 odds ratio for MCPA. You were aware of that? You received the email, right?
Again, this is just a press release that I got in the email. And I'm seeing that's what it says here. But again, there are other information that we're missing from this press release.
You know that a 3.04 odds ratio means a tripling of the risk of the condition from the product, right? You're aware of that.
What I understand here is that's what they say. But again, this is not saying how it was corrected. There's a lot of other different analyses that are done that take a look at that. And there's none of that is in here, and so it's really hard to comment on any of this without knowing the full study.
Would a tripling of a risk of cancer be significant or insignificant?
I think cancer is a very serious disease, but again, this is an epidemiology study. There's a lot of confounders. There's a lot of bias, recall bias, selection bias in all of these studies. And so just because you have these does not mean that it is causing cancer. And you still have to look at many other aspects about this for glyphosate. And so this is just a press release, again, from an anti-pesticide organization.
This email goes on to say that researchers at Northwestern University, University of Nebraska Medical Center, and the National Cancer Institute find that agriculture exposure to insecticides, herbicides, and fumigants are associated with 2.6 to 5.0-fold increase in the incidence of T-positive non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Paren refers to a specific genetic alteration in a type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Were you aware of that information before receiving this email?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This is to herbicide. I don't know that.
I apologize, Dr. Farmer, it's late in the day. But let's go back to the exercise that began this document. Your response to all of the information that we've been discussing was, here's the bottom line. How do we combat this? That's what you wanted to do, was combat this new information, right?
It's exactly what I said to you. This was a press release from an anti-pesticide organization. And what I want to know is how do we get out the information, the full information, for people to make decisions on these products. That's what that meant.
Not even interrupt you. You didn't say, how do we get out the full information? You said, here's the bottom line. How do we combat this? That's what you said in 2008, right?
And what I meant by that was, how do we get out the full information about these products?
Your job was to orchestrate an outcry for when the IARC decision came down, right, Dr. Farmer?
I would not say that that was my job to orchestrate an outcry, but we were getting people together to understand that we did not agree with IARC's evaluation of our product, and we knew people would feel the same way about that.
Your other jobs was to provide cover for regulatory agencies to continue making re-registration decisions based on the science after IARC, right?
I would not suggest that that was the word that I would have used.
Let's look at the document.
We're going to go to Exhibit 1-47, glyphosate IARC. And here you go, ma'am. Ma'am, this document was on a list of documents you reviewed prior to your deposition. Do you remember reviewing this?
I don't, but I do see that I did review it.
Okay. When you're ready, I'd like to ask you a few questions about it.
I would also point out that the team, I was reviewing a document, but this was the team that put this document together.
You're on the team, right?
No, I was not. I was just asked. You can see that I'm not on the list on the team.
Any information as to why this would be in your custodial file and why you would have reviewed it if you weren't involved with it?
Well, again, not that I'm not on the team, but because I have a long history with glyphosate and know different aspects of it, they probably asked me, which you can see I reviewed it and made comment on it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. So those comment bubbles on the side are yours?
Not all of them are. Some of them are.
Okay. The ones darkened are?
No, not all of them. Some are, some aren't. They have different initials as who's
Oh, I see.
commented on them.
Sure. It would be the DRF, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right, and going to page 2 of this document, just to be clear, a week of March 2 to 6, which was a week before the IARC findings, you were one of 3 people who was responsible to, sure I can see that, implement inoculation plan. What is an inoculation plan, Dr. Baum?
You know, again, this wasn't my document. I didn't create the headers. I was assigned a, so you might have to ask them what they think that might mean.
You heard the word inoculation before?
Well, I do, but not in this context. I mean, if you want me to say what I think this meant, because you can look at the activities, it said engage with experts to plan for publications and other activities. And I think this was talking about is getting our information out there and to respond to the classification and to defend it globally. So the title is...
All right, well, let's go to that. I'm sorry, 3530.
Post-IARC, plan was to orchestrate an outcry with IARC decision, starting on March 10, 2015, right?
That's what it says. And again, this isn't my document. Again, I have no idea who put this together, because this is separate from the one that was in front.